Hi there, I'm Mike Chapple, and in this CertMike Explains video, we're going to talk about the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, CVSS. CVSS is widely used throughout the cybersecurity community because it provides a consistent way to evaluate the severity of security vulnerabilities. CVSS scores are found in most vulnerability scanning products, and they're seen on scan reports. CVSS assigns a score to each vulnerability on a 10-point scale. We can figure out a base CVSS score by evaluating 8 different metrics and then combining the results. Now, there's a lot of math that goes into computing the CVSS score value, but you don't need to worry about the details of that math because there are calculators that do it for you. What you do need to focus on are the things that go into the calculation, because those 8 metrics help you understand the exploitability, impact, and scope of a vulnerability. Let's dig into each of those. The first metric is the attack vector metric. This describes the type of access that an attacker must have to exploit a vulnerability. The value for this metric can be physical, meaning that the attacker must be able to physically touch or manipulate the target system. Local, meaning that the attacker must have physical or logical access to the system's console. Or it can be adjacent network, meaning that the attacker must have access to the system's local network. It can also be network, meaning that the vulnerability is remotely exploitable over the network. The next metric is the attack complexity metric. This measures how difficult it is to exploit a vulnerability. We assign this metric a value of high if the vulnerability requires specialized conditions and difficult work, or low if it's easy to exploit. We next look at what user-level access the attacker must have to exploit the vulnerability using the privileges required metric. We assign this a value of high if the attack requires that the attacker first obtain administrative privileges, low if the attack requires the use of a basic user account, or none if an attacker can exploit the vulnerability without any prior access to the system. Then we assess the level of human involvement needed with the user interaction metric. This metric is set to required if the attacker must somehow get an authorized user to take some action to make the attack work, or none if the attacker can carry out the attack on their own. Those 4 metrics, attack vector, attack complexity, privileges required, and user interaction, combine to describe the exploitability of a vulnerability. Now, in addition to exploitability, we must also consider the impact of a vulnerability, and that's where the next 3 metrics come into play. We look at the impact using the 3 elements of the CIA triad. But before we get into those, I want to take a moment to invite you to visit my website at CertMike.com. On that site, I have free study plans put together to help you earn your next cybersecurity certification. The plans tie together the content that you'll find in study guides, video courses, and practice tests to help you prepare for your next certification exam and pass that test on the first try. Also, if you're enjoying this CertMike Explains video, please take a moment to click the like button below to help other people discover it. If you subscribe to my channel, you'll be among the first to see my new videos as they come out. The first impact metric is confidentiality. We assign a confidentiality rating of none if there is no confidentiality impact, partial if the attacker would have access to some but not all information, and complete if all information on the system would be compromised. We then move on to integrity and assign a rating of none if there is no integrity impact, partial if the attacker can modify some information, and complete if the attacker can modify information at will. And finally, we look at availability, assigning a rating of none if there's no availability impact, partial if there would be some degradation of performance, and complete if the attacker could shut down the system. Those last 3 metrics, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, combine to describe the impact of a vulnerability. The final metric, scope, captures whether a vulnerability can affect components other than the component with the vulnerability. We set this to changed if exploiting the vulnerability can affect resources beyond the scope of the vulnerability, or unchanged if the exploit can only affect resources managed by the same security authority. I hope this video helped you better understand CVSS. If it did, please click the like button below and subscribe to my channel for more IT certification content.